Hey guys, this is Dare to Defy 3 with the same bosses from the Red Comet event. This is the third stage so far I've done where I haven't used any FR yet. I'm sort of trying to see how far I can go without FR. However, in this stage I did use BT. It is probably quite possible to do without Ramza BT or BT Plus, although that would make the run significantly longer and I don't see a point of not using the BT here just to speed up the fight. This is a very consistent and safe party to use, mainly because Auron really negates almost all the HP damage on this fight, so he's really good on this stage. If you don't have Auron, you could potentially use Galuf as well. I think he should do fairly well here as well. As for the other two party members, I used Ramza with his BT and BT Plus, and as well as Core, who is actually still at C level 80, so I guess he's probably a good budget unit to use here. This party works very well together on this stage. First of all three party members use melee attacks, so Auron's melee Imperil actually helps a ton here so that you can inflict weakness damage. Given also that the bosses have brave resistance against every elemental except Holy, this party at least doesn't bring any elemental into play, and with the melee Imperil you'll consistently be hitting for weakness damage even without any elemental enchant. As you can see, I went into Ramza's BT mode on his second turn. I used one turn to set up so that Auron can use his LD and debuff the enemies, and Core can actually link together with Ramza, so that right here when Ramza goes into his BT mode, you at least get one free follow-up strike with Core every single turn. The main reason why I went into BT mode quite early on is so that I can quickly ramp up Ramza into 3 stacks of both of his signature buffs, and of course I can quickly get his BT aura going. Core's play is very straightforward here. I haven't used him for a long time, but essentially you just need to keep an eye on his overhead, because every time he reaches 10 stacks you get a free attack from him. Beyond that, most of the time you want to link him with Auron, since Auron is a tank. The character he's linked to has boosted defense, and both himself and the character he's linked to will be immune to breaks as well, which really helps to reduce incoming damage. Every now and then though, if the bosses are targeting Ramza, you can actually just temporarily switch targets to Ramza so that you can still get his preemptive strikes in. There's two key things to take note of this fight beyond the usual attacks that most endgame bosses have. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, the bosses throughout the entire fight would have 100% brave damage resistance against every single element in the game except for holy element and non-elemental damage. So you do need to be careful when you're putting a party together, and don't use party members that can elemental enchant the party or have innate elementals in their attacks. Secondly, as the enemy's force gauge charges, especially as it goes to 40 to 60 and beyond 80%, they also have a max brave down aura on your party, which is actually most noticeable when they are above 80% force gauge. The max brave down aura significantly cuts your damage, since your brave will be severely capped and your HP damage is linked to it. And this is where support units such as Ramza are very important. You want to try to counteract this max brave down aura as much as possible by introducing support characters who have max brave up aura. Overall, your max brave would still be somewhat reduced because the boss's auras are pretty strong. But for the most part, as long as you have 30 to 50k max brave, you should still be able to consistently dish out damage, because Auron's counter debuff also boosts HP damage done. So, you know, for example, 60 to 70k brave dumps will translate to 100k plus HP damage anyway. The good thing is that the enemy's force time doesn't last very long, and that's because every time they hit a 100% force gauge, enemy A will get a cut in turn order, which is warping his turns to the front and getting 3 turns in a row. Considering that the enemy's force time only lasts for 5 turns, that means that after the turn warp, you are only left with 2 turns of enemy force time remaining. Once the enemy's force gauge resets to 0, your max brave will be restored, and you want to try to take that opportunity to use your hardest hitting attacks so that you can have a phase where you dish out at least optimal damage. Since this is mostly a counter attack team, you don't have to worry about turn order and such. Any turn order at the start would work, and you just want to make sure that core is forever linked to somebody, and you just need to keep an eye on who the bosses are targeting so that you make the most use out of core's linked attacks. You also have to think carefully about what summon you want to use for this fight, keeping in mind that bosses have 100% brave resistance to every element except holy. This means that you ideally want to use either Alexander's summon, which provides some nice healing and the holy elemental enchant, or use summons without any elementals attached to them, of which there are 2, Bahamut, which is the one I'm using, or Odin. If you use another elemental summon, say for example Ifrit or Shiva, what will happen is when you pop summon mode, you'll notice that all your brave attacks are suddenly reduced to 1 damage, and that's because all of your attacks will be enchanted by that element, and you'll be hitting the 100% brave resistance that the bosses have. As far as call abilities on this party setup, it's really very flexible here. I set a Cyan LD call on Auron just so that I have something hard hitting to use during summon mode, and I set a Prishe call on core for the same reason. You don't have to bring any defensive calls at all. Like I said, Auron as a tank keeps your party very safe. In fact, as you can see right here, you'll be taking virtually 0 damage most of the time. There are some times when you might take some damage, but Auron can easily heal up and you'll be having HP regen anyway. Because the enemies will inflict low turn rate on your party members as an aura, and they can get multiple turns in a row, you can also consider call abilities that provide party-wide auras, such as Kate Sith or Iroha. Although they may only last for 2 turns, given that bosses take many turns in between and you'll be counter-attacking, you actually get extended benefits out of all those call abilities. Beyond that, the rest of the fight is pretty straightforward. You do have to keep an eye on the enemy's debuffs and refresh Auron's melee in peril through his purgatory attack. One final note, you might notice throughout the fight that I'm also dispelling all the enemy buffs rather consistently, and that's because I gave Auron a Vanille full sphere, which allows him to dispel 1 buff every time he breaks the enemy. That's not really needed at all. The buffs that the enemies grant themselves don't really do anything much. They provide, I believe, max brave up buff to themselves, and none of the buffs the enemies grant would reduce the damage that you do anyway. So, and there's no defense up buffs that they can grant. So for the most part, you can really ignore the buffs if you don't want to use your Vanille sphere here. As a final tip, try to pop your BT mode or your summon mode when the enemy's force gauge is below 20%. So this way you get to both freeze their force gauge as well as make use of the window of time when your max breath isn't affected by the enemy's auras. I guess as the fight is going on, just want to quickly mention a little bit about the Dare to Defy event so far. I think it's a really good event, and the concept behind the lockout is that it really encourages strategizing and careful thinking about characters who you otherwise would not normally use. I mean, here I'm actually using Core, and without the lockout I probably won't even use him until he gets his C90 release. And I think that's really good for the game. It makes things a little bit more interesting. And keep in mind that even if you can't do it, say if you're a new player and you don't have an expanded roster, you aren't really losing a lot anyway. All the rewards in the Dare to Defy events are somewhat bonus rewards. In the JP version of the game, they didn't have this event, and the players there, made do with the usual rewards that they get from the current events. When this event was first announced, I know I saw quite a few people concerned about having enough FRs to use throughout all 7 events. In theory, people were saying, if there's 7 events with lockouts, you need 7 different FRs, and at this early Shinryu stage of the game, not many people have that many FRs fully built. Now that we are sort of halfway through already, I think more people are starting to realize that you can really make do without FRs. Heck, so far I haven't used a single FR, and I've already completed 3 out of the 7 stages. The runs are long, yes, I have to admit that, but that's really because of the inflated HP pools that the bosses have and the fact that you aren't using an FR. But I think that's a reasonable trade-off to make, because if you can complete Shinryu stages in 10 minutes without using an FR, then the question is, why would you even need an FR in the first place? You could just do all the stages in 10 minutes. So I think it's reasonable to expect that if you want to use budget units and not use any FRs, the fights would take considerably longer. And if that's not really your cup of tea and you want to smash through the fights as quickly as possible, you can always try to use FRs and maybe complete as many of the events as you can with the FRs that you have, and at least you still get some bonus rewards out of it. As for myself though, I really enjoy this part of the fight where to me, thinking about approaches that will enable you to win without using FR was actually really quite fun. And discussing this with other content creators as well, thinking about characters that we haven't used for a long time. There are quite a number of characters that can really shine across some of these stages, so really kudos to the developers for introducing this sort of event. In any case, I think that's the end of the commentary for this run. The rest of the fight, as you can see, is pretty consistent. I'm just going in and out of the cycle of boss force time and then boss with 0 force gauge, and cycling my attacks accordingly. As always, if the video has been helpful, please leave a like, comment and subscribe, because it really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next Dare to Defy stage. Bye!
責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。魂ごと砕け。責務は果たす。ついてこれるか。責務は果たす。魂ごと砕け。この手が責務は果たす。強払いはしてやるさ。少しばかり問題だ。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。
侮るな。
責務は果たす。人たちで切り落とす。燃えたけれ。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。強払いはしてやるぞ。沈んでもらおう。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。これをどうだ。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。魂ごと砕け。 露払いはしてやるさ。沈んでもらう。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。殺剣列コロコロのみ。責務は果たす。両手トリプルプラス。責務は果たす。人たちで切り落とす。燃えたけれ。責務は果たす。両手トリプルプラス。
耐えられるかな。こいつでとどめだ。
責務は果たす。人たちで切り落とす。燃えたけれ。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。
いけるぞ。
責務は果たす。責務は果たす。
侮るな。
責務は果たす。責務は果たす。魂ごと砕く。責務は果たす。露払いはしてやるさ。沈んでもらう。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。これで最後だ。じゃあ責務は果たす。
トリプルプラス。
責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。魂ごと砕く。責務は果たす。露払いはしてやるぞ。沈んでもらう。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。責務は果たす。
魂を 引き出す